Let me tell you about the scariest thing that ever happened to me. It's a story I can never forget, and every time I think about it, I still get chills. It all started when I took a job at Walmart. I was working the night shift because I liked the peace and quiet. There were usually just a few customers, and the routine tasks gave me a sense of calm. But one night, everything changed. Michelle, one of my coworkers, was always cheerful and loved the quiet nights just as much as I did. She was working in the cereal aisle, stocking shelves like usual. It was around midnight when she first felt it, a strange sensation, like someone was watching her. She shrugged it off, thinking it was just her imagination. But as the minutes ticked by, the feeling got stronger. She told me later that the hairs on her arms stood up. Then, she saw him. A tall, lanky figure at the end of the aisle, dressed in a dark hoodie. He just stood there, staring at her. She tried to ignore him and focused on her work, but she could feel his eyes on her back. Michelle glanced up again, and he was gone. She let out a sigh of relief, thinking she was just being paranoid. But no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't shake the feeling that he was still there, somewhere in the store. The store's PA system crackled to life, and Michelle nearly jumped out of her skin. It was just Jerry, the store manager, announcing something about a meeting next week. She laughed at herself for being so jumpy and went back to stocking shelves. Then, she heard footsteps. Slow, deliberate footsteps echoing down the empty aisles. She froze, listening. The footsteps stopped, and the silence was deafening. She turned around, but there was no one there. She shook her head, trying to clear the fog of fear that was clouding her mind. As she moved to the next aisle, she saw a flash of movement out of the corner of her eye. She spun around, and there he was again. The man in the hoodie, only this time he was closer, too close. She could see his face now, a pale mask of madness with a twisted smile that made her blood run cold. "Can I help you?" she managed to stammer, her voice shaking. The man just stared at her, his smile widening. He didn't say a word, just stood there, watching her. Michelle's heart pounded in her chest. She backed away slowly, never taking her eyes off him. She reached the end of the aisle and turned, breaking into a run. She raced to the break room, her safe haven, and burst through the door, slamming it shut behind her and locking it. She leaned against the door, trying to catch her breath. Her hands were shaking so badly she could barely hold her phone. She dialed Jerry's number, praying he was still in the store. "Jerry, it's Michelle," she whispered urgently when he picked up. "There's a man in the store. He's following me." Jerry's voice was calm, almost too calm. "Are you sure, Michelle? Maybe it's just a customer." "No," she insisted. "He's not a customer. There's something wrong with him. Please come to the break room." "I'll be right there," Jerry said. Michelle hung up, trying to steady her nerves. She glanced around the break room, searching for something to defend herself with. Her eyes landed on a heavy metal stapler. She grabbed it, clutching it like a lifeline. The minutes dragged on as she waited for Jerry. Finally, she heard footsteps approaching the break room. She held her breath, hoping it was Jerry. The doorknob rattled, and then the door creaked open. It was Jerry. Relief flooded through her, and she ran to him, tears streaming down her face. "Thank God you're here," she sobbed. "He's out there, Jerry. He wants to hurt me." Jerry hugged her awkwardly, patting her back. "It's okay, Michelle. We'll find him." They left the break room together, Jerry leading the way. The store was eerily silent, the only sound the soft buzz of the fluorescent lights. They checked aisle after aisle, but the man was nowhere to be found. "Maybe he left," Jerry suggested. Michelle shook her head. "No, he's here. I can feel it." They continued searching, but the man had vanished. After an hour, Jerry convinced Michelle to go back to work. Reluctantly, she agreed. She returned to stocking the shelves, but she couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. The hours dragged on, each minute feeling like an eternity. Finally, her shift ended. She clocked out and hurried to her car, glancing over her shoulder the entire way. She locked the doors and drove home, her hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly her knuckles turned white. When she got home, she double-checked all the locks and windows before collapsing into bed. She was exhausted, but sleep wouldn't come. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the man's face, that twisted smile, those cold, empty eyes. Days passed, and Michelle tried to convince herself it was all in her head. But she couldn't escape the feeling of dread that hung over her like a dark cloud. She stopped working the night shift, asking for daytime hours instead. But even in the bright light of day, she couldn't shake the fear. One night, as she was getting ready for bed, she heard a noise outside her window. Her heart raced as she crept to the window and peeked out. Her blood turned to ice. There he was, the man in the hoodie, standing in her yard, staring up at her window with that same twisted smile. She screamed, slamming the window shut and drawing the curtains. She called the police, but by the time they arrived, the man was gone. They took her statement and promised to patrol the area, but Michelle knew they wouldn't find him. He was playing a game, a sick, twisted game, and she was his prey. The nightmares started soon after. She dreamed of him creeping into her house, standing over her bed, his cold breath on her neck. She woke up screaming, drenched in sweat. But the nightmares felt so real. One night, she woke to find her bedroom door open. She was sure she had closed it. Her heart pounded as she got up to close it. But as she reached for the doorknob, she felt a hand on her shoulder. She spun around, but there was no one there. Her breath came in ragged gasps as she slammed the door shut and locked it. She climbed back into bed, pulling the covers over her head like a frightened child. Sleep eluded her. Every creak of the house, every rustle of the wind made her jump. She knew he was out there, watching her, and there was nothing she could do to stop him. The days blurred into a haze of fear and exhaustion. She stopped going to work, stopped leaving the house. She barely ate, barely slept. She became a prisoner in her own home, trapped by her own terror. One night, as she lay in bed, she heard a noise downstairs. A faint, almost imperceptible creak. She could barely breathe. She grabbed the big flashlight from her nightstand and crept to the top of the stairs. The house was dark and silent. She strained her ears, listening for any sound. Then she heard it again, a soft, slow creak, like someone was creeping up the stairs. Her heart pounded in her chest as she gripped the flashlight tighter. She took a deep breath and started down the stairs, one step at a time. The creaking grew louder with each step. When she reached the bottom of the stairs, she saw him. The man in the hoodie. He stood in the middle of her living room, his twisted smile illuminated by the moonlight streaming through the window. "Why are you doing this?" she whispered, her voice trembling. He tilted his head, his smile widening. "Because I like you," he said, his voice a chilling whisper. She backed away, but he took a step forward. "Stay away from me," she pleaded, raising the flashlight. He laughed, a low, menacing sound that sent shivers down her spine. "You can't stop me, Michelle," he said. "No one can." She turned and ran, but he was faster. He grabbed her, pulling her back. She screamed, struggling to break free, but his grip was like iron. He pushed her to the floor, his cold hands wrapping around her throat. She fought with everything she had, but he was too strong. Her vision blurred, darkness closing in around her. She could feel her life slipping away. Then suddenly, the pressure released. She gasped for air, coughing and choking. She looked up, and he was gone. She lay on the floor, shaking and sobbing, too terrified to move. The police found her the next morning, curled up in a ball on the living room floor. She told them everything, but they didn't believe her. There was no sign of forced entry, no evidence that anyone had been in the house. They said it was just a nightmare. But Michelle knew the truth. He was still out there, waiting for her. She just knew he would come back. She tried to resume a normal life, but every shadow held a threat, every noise a potential horror. Michelle couldn't escape the feeling that she was never alone, that he was always just around the corner, waiting for the perfect moment to strike again. Months passed, and the terror began to dull, replaced by a numbness. She went back to work, though she never felt safe. Her colleagues noticed the change in her, the way she jumped at every sound, the dark circles under her eyes, the haunted look she carried. One quiet night, Michelle was restocking the shelves, trying to lose herself in the monotony of the task. The store was unusually empty, the silence almost comforting. She moved methodically, her mind wandering, when she heard a faint noise behind her. She froze, her heart pounding in her chest. She slowly turned, her eyes scanning the aisle. Nothing. She let out a shaky breath and forced herself to continue working. But the noises came again, louder this time, a soft, eerie whispering just on the edge of hearing. She spun around, her eyes wide with fear. The aisle was empty. She was alone, or so it seemed. She took a step forward, her hand clutching the box cutter in her pocket. The whispering grew louder, a chorus of voices hissing her name. Michelle. Michelle. Her breath came in short, ragged gasps. She backed away, her eyes darting around the empty store. The lights flickered, casting long, twisted shadows. She felt the familiar sensation of being watched, her skin prickling with fear. The whispering was closer now, surrounding her. She turned, ready to run, but something cold and sharp pressed against her neck. She froze, the box cutter falling from her trembling hand. "Hello, Michelle," a voice whispered in her ear. It was him. She could feel his breath on her skin, his hand gripping her shoulder. "Why?" she managed to choke out, her voice barely a whisper. "Because it's fun," he replied, his voice dripping with malice. "You're my favorite game." She tried to scream, but no sound came out. She felt the cold blade against her skin, felt his cruel grip tightening. Desperation surged through her, and she fought with everything she had, struggling to break free. But he was too strong. His grip tightened, and the world began to fade. She could feel herself slipping away, darkness closing in around her. And then, suddenly, he was gone. She collapsed to the floor, gasping for air. The store was silent, the whispering voices gone. She looked around, but there was no sign of him. Michelle knew he would be back someday. He was always hiding, stalking her. No matter where she went, no matter what she did, she could never escape him. The nights grew longer, each one filled with terror and dread. She could feel him closing in, could hear his whispers in the darkness. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw his twisted smile, felt his cold breath on her neck. Michelle knew the truth. She was trapped in his game, a pawn in his sick, twisted world, and there was no way out. Scared yet? Click on the subscribe now, or maybe you will face something like this. It was a regular Tuesday afternoon at Walmart. The store was busy with people shopping, carts squeaking, and cash registers beeping. I was working at the customer service desk with my colleague, Ingrid. She had dark hair pulled back into a tight ponytail, and she was quick with her work. Amanda, our blonde coworker, was helping customers with returns. Things were normal until a man, probably in his late 30s, came stomping towards us. His face was red with anger, and his eyes looked wild. He slammed a box of broken electronics on the counter and yelled, "This is the third time I've returned this piece of junk." His name tag read Mike. Ingrid stayed calm and said, "I'm sorry for the inconvenience, sir. Let's see what we can do for you." Mike wasn't having any of it. "I don't want your apologies. I want my money back." His voice echoed through the store. Amanda tried to calm him down. We understand your frustration. We'll process the return immediately. Mike's eyes darted between us, and his breathing was heavy and erratic. You think this is funny? You think you can treat customers like this and get away with it? No, sir. We're just trying to help, Amanda replied, her voice shaking a little. Mike leaned in, his face inches from Ingrid's. You better watch yourselves. I'll make sure you regret this. With that, he stormed out of the store. Ingrid and Amanda exchanged nervous glances, trying to laugh it off, but the sense of unease lingered. The afternoon passed slowly, and as the sun dipped towards the horizon, the store grew quieter. As we finished our shifts and headed towards the employee exit, something felt off. The parking lot, usually filled with cars and people, was eerily empty. Do you feel that? Amanda asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Yeah, Ingrid replied, glancing around. Something's off. We quickened our pace, headed towards our cars. Suddenly, the overhead lights in the parking lot flickered and went out, plunging us into darkness. What the hell? Amanda exclaimed, fumbling for her phone to use as a flashlight. Before she could turn it on, we heard a noise, a soft, menacing chuckle. We spun around, and the dim light from the store cast long shadows. Mike stepped out from behind a row of parked cars, his face twisted into a sinister grin. I told you I'd make you regret it, he said, his voice low and threatening. What do you want? Ingrid demanded, her voice trembling. Oh, just a little payback, he replied, pulling something from his jacket. The glint of a knife caught the faint light. Run! Amanda screamed, grabbing Ingrid's hand. We bolted towards the store, our hearts pounding in our chests. Mike's footsteps echoed behind us, growing louder with each second. We reached the doors and banged on them desperately, but they were locked. Ingrid spotted a maintenance door to the side. This way, she yelled, pulling Amanda towards it. We ducked inside, slamming the door behind us and locking it. The narrow hallway was dimly lit, filled with cleaning supplies and clutter. We could hear Mike outside, his footsteps slow and methodical. He was toying with us, savoring our fear. We need to find another way out, Amanda whispered, tears streaming down her face. We crept down the hallway, every creak and groan of the building amplifying our terror. We found another door and pushed it open, emerging into the darkened store. The aisles were empty, the shelves casting eerie shadows. Stay quiet, Ingrid whispered, leading the way towards the front of the store. We heard Mike's voice taunting us from the darkness. You can't hide forever. I'll find you. Ingrid spotted the security office and motioned for Amanda to follow. We slipped inside and locked the door, our breaths ragged and panicked. We need to call the police, Ingrid said, grabbing the phone. She dialed 911, her hand shaking. 911, what's your emergency? The operator answered. There's a man with a knife, and he's hunting us at the Walmart on Elm Street, Ingrid replied urgently. Please hurry. We're dispatching officers to your location. Stay on the line. We heard a loud crash as Mike smashed through the maintenance door. His footsteps grew louder, closer. He's coming, Amanda whispered, clutching Ingrid's arm. The door handle rattled, and we saw the blade of Mike's knife slide through the crack in the door. He laughed, a sound that sent chills down our spines. Open up, ladies. Let's end this. Ingrid and Amanda backed away, searching for anything to defend themselves with. Ingrid grabbed a heavy flashlight, her hand shaking. The door splintered as Mike forced his way in, his eyes wild, his smile twisted. Time to pay, he hissed, lunging at us. Ingrid swung the flashlight with all her strength, hitting Mike in the head. He stumbled but didn't fall. Amanda grabbed a chair and threw it at him, but he dodged easily. You think you can stop me? He snarled, slashing at us with the knife. We dodged his attacks, the narrow ring working to our advantage. Mike swung wildly, his anger blinding him. Ingrid saw an opening and tackled him, knocking the knife from his hand. Amanda joined in, helping to try and restrain the psychopath. Ingrid pulled his arm up around his back while he was on his stomach. It felt as if she was about to break his arm. He yelled out in pain as both women sat on him, their weight restraining him and pinning him to the ground. We held him there until the sound of sirens filled the air. Moments later, police officers burst into the room, securing Mike on the ground and handcuffing him. He thrashed and screamed, but they held him tight. Ingrid and Amanda collapsed, trembling and exhausted. The officers helped them up, assuring them they were safe now. As they walked out of the store, they were checked out by paramedics on the scene. The nightmare was over, but the memory of that terrifying night would haunt them forever. The eerie feeling of being hunted, the cold eyes of a madman, and the darkness that had swallowed the familiar aisles of Walmart would stay with them, a chilling reminder of how quickly normal can turn into horror. Walmart was one of the few stores around here that stay open 24 hours. On a cold night, around 10 p.m., the store was still busy with late-night shoppers. But as the hours passed, the store got quieter and the weirdos started to come in. That night, I was in the cereal aisle, stocking shelves as usual. I noticed a customer walk past the aisle. He had curly hair and a big, stuffed backpack. He stopped at the end of the aisle and looked at me. While I looked back at him, he pretended to look at the cereal. He lingered there for a minute, then came closer and asked me where the bread was. I pointed him in the right direction, and he slowly walked away. I thought that was the end of it. But as I kept working, I noticed him passing by the aisle again and again, each time looking down at me. He didn't have any bread or anything else in his hands. He was just wandering around with that big backpack. I started to feel uneasy. I decided to finish my work in the cereal aisle quickly and moved to another section. I took my empty cart back to the warehouse and grabbed a new one filled with boxes to stock. I picked an aisle far away from the cereal section and started working in the chips aisle. About 45 minutes later, I saw him again. He found me in the chips aisle. He still had nothing in his hands. He walked towards me, and I could feel my heart racing. He came closer and started talking to me. He said he had been watching me and couldn't resist coming up to tell me how beautiful I was. I tried to be polite, gave a fake little laugh, and said thank you. But he didn't stop. He asked me personal questions, like where I was from. I gave fake answers to everything. His breath was awful, and he had this creepy smile. He asked for my number. I told him I was seeing someone. He insisted that there was nothing wrong with being friends. To get him to leave me alone, I gave him a fake number. I thought that would be the end of it. Hours went by, and I kept working. Then, the only other stock worker on duty walkie-talkied me, saying there was a creepy guy asking for me. My heart sank. I told her to say I had left. I decided to hide in the employee lounge for a while. I made it to the lounge and sat down, trying to calm my nerves. But then the double doors opened, and he walked in. He looked angry. He yelled, "You gave me a fake number." I was terrified. I told him he couldn't be back here. He took off his backpack and plopped it on the table next to me. He started unzipping it while staring at me. I knew I had to get out of there. I ran past him without thinking. He tried to grab my arm but missed. I ran through the store, looking back to see if he was following me. He was. I ran to the front of the store and outside to my car. I could see him coming out of the store, looking for me. I got in my car and drove away as fast as I could. I called the night manager and told him what happened. He said he would call the police and ask me to come back, but I refused. The next day, I went back to work and my manager told me he had reported the man to the police. They had the surveillance footage and they were looking into it. I never saw the guy again, but the fear of what could have happened still haunts me. I don't know what he was planning to do with whatever was in that backpack, and I never want to find out. But what do you think about it, guys? Please let me know in the comments and subscribe for more videos like these.